My creative journey began when I met Bill. He was a young potter. I loved to paint. We decided we were going to combine our skills, start a pottery, and live happily ever after. Well, 40 years on, I think we've made it. We began with our first pottery, and we saw our friends embark on other careers, lucrative careers in medicine, law, and finance. But we decided it was the creative flame that fired our souls, so we were going to make our own way. We got a bank loan, we bought some clay, we hired a workshop, and off we went. This is one of the first pots that he made and that I painted. So our work has always been a combination of the two of us. But this is our first kiln. And you can see from the size of it that we meant business. We had no backup plan, so this had to work. Our biggest challenge, though, was always to come up with new ideas, to be creative, but also to be commercial, because otherwise we weren't going to survive. These pots were inspired by pottery we'd seen in the British Museum that came from Minoan Crete origin. One of our first commissions, we were very flattered to get, was from a local cricket club, and they were celebrating their centenary. And they asked us if we would make a special pot for them. So Bill made a beautiful big jug, and then my part was to inscribe it with all the lettering, which I spent hours on, very carefully doing it, and I handed it over to them, only to read in the paper a few weeks later that I hadn't spelt the word cricket right, and I'd forgotten to put the K in the middle. I'd been so busy looking at all the detail, I'd forgotten to put in the proper spelling. Anyway, I think even to this day, they have it in a special position in their cricket club. Everybody has one of those defining moments when random events come together and have unexpected results. One of ours came a few years after we'd started, when by now we had a young family, more mouths to feed, and we had to broaden our horizons and take our work further afield. And so we got a stand at a big national trade show where all the international buyers would come, and we hoped that we would get enough orders to see us through the next few months. But these trade shows aren't cheap, and so we used all our money to get the stand, to get the space. We made as best pots that we could to take with us, but we had no more money left, so we had to borrow the display stands. We duly arrived and set all our work up. This is one of the ranges of pottery that we took, which is inspired by the neck of a swan. We set it all up the night before the trade show started. And then the next morning we arrived, all nervous and ready to meet all these buyers, only to see all the stands slowly collapse around us and all the pots fly through the air. Everybody around us leapt into action and caught them, and thankfully, I don't think we broke many. But we only had a few minutes to put it all back together, so very kindly everybody helped us. But by now, I think our spirits were quite low and our expectations had probably dropped as well. But at the end of that first day, we were truly amazed to be awarded the prize for the best stand and the best products in the whole of this national trade show. To say we were flabbergasted is an understatement. So what lessons did we learn from that? As a result of getting that award, we then had an avalanche of orders. We had orders that took us well into the next 2 years. We had an offer to go and show in New York, which began a whole lot of exporting all over the world. So from that pivotal moment, our lives changed. And I think the lessons that we learnt were that we had done the best work that we could, and despite the disaster, we survived. We learnt, as John Lennon once said, that life is what happens to you whilst you're making other plans. We also learnt that next time to check the shelves when we put up a display stand. 20 years ago, we moved down to Cornwall, to Port Isaac, which is a little fishing village on the north coast of Cornwall. And we're surrounded by beautiful scenery. We look out on the Atlantic Ocean. Every day, our surroundings are different, and it's all dependent on the tide and the weather and the seasons. This is the view I look at every morning. Lucky me. We bought an old chapel, which was derelict at the time. And over the years, we've renovated it. It started off as very derelict inside. And very slowly, we changed it into a working pottery and a gallery and our home. That's the same scene. But you can see our work now is influenced by Cornwall, by the moods of Cornwall, by the light, the colours. In the summer, the colours are soft and gold and warm and pink. But in the winter, everything changes and the climate is harsh. The tides can be high, the storms can be wild, and we try and get all of these influences in our work. I paint the pottery as Bill makes it, and this is me decorating one of the big bowls that we make. But I also have developed my own painting. And sometimes I see the pots as the canvas, and I wrap my pictures around them, metaphorically. This is a panoramic view of where we live. So if you spun the pot around, you'd see the whole of the harbour that I look out on every day. But one of my favourite days is when I can take my paints and go and sit on the cliffs and look at the scenery and paint it. It's so easy down there to get lost and absorbed in what is all around me. The north coast of Cornwall is very harsh and rugged, whereas the south coast is very soft. And those granite hard edges and colours are what I try and capture in my paintings. This is the painting I did on that day. The light and the shade is what particularly fascinates me, and the reflections in the water. In the early summer and in the autumn, the shadows are soft and long, and the colours are soft, and you get the reflection of the fishing boats. They sit in the harbour and just wait for the tide to rise so that they can go out to sea. And we try and get the texture of the landscape as well, actually in the surface of the pottery, so that it becomes a physical part of the pottery. This was a painting I did when I was walking the southwest coast path, and I came around a corner just as the shadows were about to engulf that small little cottage, which just happened to catch the last of the summer light. Our process. Now, we first started using clay, which unfortunately we had a bad batch where a flux had been added, and so all the pots melted in the kiln, So although it looks rather artistic, it's not very functional as a bread bin. We now buy our clay from Australia, but we only buy it about once every 4 years. And it's a beautiful, soft, white clay that's very reliable. This is Bill throwing a jug, and it's made in 2 parts. You'll see there are 2 pieces that are made identically, and then one is reversed and inverted and put together. And then you start getting the shape of the belly of the jug. Those 2 pieces are fused together and turned so that it becomes a smooth surface. And then it's brought up to the neck of the jug. The throwing is very physically demanding, especially with the big pieces. And then it's brought up to the top of the jug. And after that, they're left to dry until they're leather hard, and then they're turned, much like a wood turner would shave off the wood. And that's a slow, rhythmic process. That's usually when he listens to the cricket. And then the handle is added, and we've shaped these handles to look like the fish. And then they dry until they're bone dry, and then they have the first firing. And after the first firing, that's where my part of the process comes in. Now, the way I paint, it's an immediate process. I can't change the mark I've made. Once it's on there, it's there forever. And you can see in museums pottery that's been made thousands of years ago, and it still holds the mark, the thumbprint of the potter, which comes down to us over the centuries, that direct human touch. So this is the pot that I've painted, and it's now waiting for its second firing. The firing takes about 12 hours, and then it takes another 24 hours for the pot to cool down. Each time we open the kiln, we've never got over that awful anticipation of whether we're going to be met with disaster or success. Now we have small electric kilns. We don't have such big kilns anymore. And that's the finished piece. We finish our pottery with gold now. It's 24 karat gold, which is painted on and then fired for a 3rd time. So by the time they're finished, they've been worked on for up to about 6 weeks. But creativity has become part of our lives in other ways as well. Bill, my husband, is very musical, and he's in a group that sings, and they've had a creative journey as well, which has taken them from the main stage at Glastonbury to standing ovations at the Royal Albert Hall, which isn't bad for a 65-year-old granddad who's about to start on his camper van festival years. So here we are, 40 years on. We've survived and eventually thrived. We thoroughly enjoyed our lives of being creative. But when we started, people said to us, "It's all right for you, you've got talent, you're clever, you can do it, I can't." Well, when we started, we couldn't either, but we realised that we needed to learn. And we learned everywhere and anywhere that we could. In the days before the internet, we went to workshops, we went and studied at the hands of the best people we could find. And we've never stopped learning. That journey still continues for us now. But I believe that everybody's creative. Everybody has got that need for self-expression. And I believe that if you nurture that creative flame inside you, it leads to a life of fulfillment and satisfaction at whatever level. Somebody once said to me that 80% of the working population are dissatisfied in their jobs, which seems very sad. So I believe if you look inside, everybody carries this creative flame within them, and it should be nurtured. Thank you.